Hi everyone. In this video, we'll be talking about how can you begin to give better feedback. Now, this video takeaway is coming from the book No Rules, Netflix and the Culture of Reinvention. And it basically states that usually the problem with feedback is that there's a lack of clarity and shared understanding of how to give feedback, how to receive feedback, and also the fear of how people will take the feedback on. Will it cause them to be offended or will they take it and improve upon the feedback we have given? Like any problem, I think there's always two sides of the problem. The first side is coming from who is giving the feedback. Now, the first problem with giving feedback is usually when the feedback is given with negative intent. And this is when, let's say, someone's very frustrated and they use the feedback as a way to vent their frustration, to hurt the recipient, or to advance personal agendas instead of aiming to help the person. The second part of this problem is when the feedback is very vague or unactionable. Now, when the feedback is too general and doesn't provide specific guidance on what the recipient can change, then it feels like there's no point in giving that feedback. For example, let's say someone's presentation didn't go so well, and you say, "Okay, your presentation was just horrible," but you don't give into specific details as to how they can make it better or how certain aspects of what it didn't go so well and how they could improve it. That's when I think people feel like, generally speaking, you're just using feedback to just sound negative. The third reason why there's a problem in giving feedback is because the giver of the feedback sometimes is annoyed, and it's not so much of the feedback is given with the perspective of trying to help the individual or the company achieve the goal, but it's just meant to just give outlet for the giver to just vent their personal irritation. So what is a better way to give feedback? Now, according to this book, feedback should be aimed to assist. So that means is that whenever you're giving feedback, you give it for the positive intention of helping the company or the individual improve. And it's not for you to use this as an outlet to express your personal frustration or for personal gain. Whenever you give the feedback, it's always aimed to assist, aimed to help, aimed to understand how the recipient can do better. And the feedback also has to be actionable. So feedback must be focused on specific behaviors that recipient can change and providing clear and concrete suggestions for improvement rather than vague criticisms. Generally speaking, people always want to improve, but sometimes they don't know how to improve because they don't have the value of perspective or experience. When someone can come to that discussion and give them their perspective with clear cut instructions of, hey, maybe you want to do this is why you should do that. When you try to explain their point of view, then yes, it becomes a two-way conversation of how we can collectively improve as a team rather than people using feedback as just a criticism. And how Netflix actually embodies this feedback culture is that they use a shared memo with electronic comments. So, for example, employees create a shared memo outlining the proposal. So, dozens of colleagues are invited to provide input, and feedback is given as electronic comments directly into the margin of the document. For example, let's say it's a shared PowerPoint or shared Word document. So, all comments are visible to everyone, offering a quick overview of supporting and dissenting views. And these comments are not supposed to be a vote for the idea or a democracy where you take the majority of the feedback and then we end up actioning on it. But it's actually to provide valuable insights and candid feedback before people make major decisions on major projects. So the whole exercise of this Netflix method of getting people to leave electronic comments on a shared memo is they want to understand the nuances of different experiences. And then through Netflix feedback loop, what they're trying to do is they're trying to stress test the thinking. They're trying to get the best ideas. They're trying to get people to look at the problem from all angles and also get a lot of diverse opinions and collect data points before they finalize major decisions for major projects. If your organization can attract and retain talented people, then it doesn't become the case that people should be worried about feedback rather than if you give them appropriate feedback mechanism that allows people to give feedback honestly and sincerely and with a certain kind of system to it, then you're able to harvest ideas. Harvesting the ideas especially is so important because how can you stay innovative if you do not? I think employees also do make up the fabric of what runs a company, and to accept feedback or receive feedback means that you must create a place that's psychologically safe where people can give feedback with the honest intention of making improvement. And of course, they want to hit the company's goal together. Now, the second perspective is from those receiving the feedback. Why do people have problems receiving feedback? Two reasons: defensiveness and ego protection. So basically, when people are given feedback, And depending on where they worked before, depending on how they were taught to receive feedback, they might feel a bit defensive. And I think it's normal whenever you feel like you might be attacked, that suddenly your whole body and mind shrinks up and you're trying to protect yourself. What is so important is that it's important to actually encourage each other to actively listen to open mind, and for the person that's receiving the feedback to show appreciation. Because I think that giving feedback is hard because the person that gives feedback sometimes may have good intention and they genuinely want the other person that's receiving the feedback to succeed. But also, I think when it's a give and take culture, meaning that we try to accept everybody, we try to assume that everybody has good intention first. And that creates a more receptive environment for development where people feel like they won't get shot if they give feedback, and they won't feel like they're shot as well if they receive the feedback and don't action upon it. Another reason why we have problems when it comes to receiving feedback is also because some people dismiss the feedback without consideration. So there is this principle in Netflix called accept or discard, which means that whatever feedback you receive, you have the autonomy to accept or discard it, given your own way of thinking about the feedback that we received. But before that happens, first of all, you have to first appreciate the feedback that was given to you. When you do that, what you're trying to train people to do is that you're getting people to think, for someone else to give you feedback, it must have taken a lot out of them to have the courage and also the thinking to say that I truly want this project or this person to succeed. Therefore, that's why I'm giving them feedback. This is for them to improve. So, what is a better way as a receiver of feedback is to first, number one, appreciate it. When receiving feedback, we have to resist our defensiveness and our a tendency to sometimes reject feedback directly because we feel we might be attacked. But instead, we have to focus on listening carefully on what is a message and considering the message with an open mind and avoid anger. And for us to do this way, we have to show appreciation for the person that's giving us the feedback by saying that, thank you for giving feedback. I will take into consideration what you said. And the second portion of feedback is accept or discard. Now, of course, whenever you're given feedback, you have the autonomy to listen and consider all the feedback received. And number two is you have the autonomy to decide whether or not to act upon the feedback. And I feel that by outlining this culture of appreciating and then accepting and discussing the feedback, by first appreciating and accepting or discarding the feedback, people learn to move within the culture with a sense of gratitude to say that they have to understand that somebody that gives them feedback is also being vulnerable with them, number one. Number two is that being cordial and being professional by saying thank you after receiving a feedback. Both parties should understand that it's up to the recipient to decide what they want to do with this feedback. So I think it's important sometimes when you want to get the best minds of in an organization that, first you attract the best talent, you retain the best talent, and then you create a culture that allows them to get better when when they are with others that are like them. Meaning to say that everybody is pushing to become greater, but they're doing it with such a very clear intention about being professional, about receiving and giving feedback as well. Because I think like everybody wants to improve, but no one wants to feel like they are being trapped to having to implement somebody else's feedback, or they are trapped that to say that just because the person giving feedback to them is probably from a higher position than them, then they are forced to implement the feedback, actually disagreeing with it. So I think that this steps over here helps people to listen to with an open mind. At the same time, allows them to still make the decision after careful consideration of pros and cons of all the feedback that they have been receiving.